All right, everybody. Instant reaction time. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy here with you from Sooners Illustrated. Oklahoma has got their guy in 2026. Four-star quarterback Jaden O'Neal has announced his commitment to the Sooners. You saw that commitment. Some of you probably tuning in right now on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. A big fish, the centerpiece of Oklahoma's 2026 class, is in. We have our lead recruiting analyst insider, Collin Kennedy, here to break it down a little bit, some initial gut reaction as Oklahoma gets this big fish. Collin, you and I have talked about on the Sooners Illustrated podcast what we think of Jaden O'Neal. We both think the world of him as a player. Talk about it a little bit, just, we'll get into kind of the ramifications in a moment, but getting this kid in, this is a top 10 quarterback, a star in the making, major addition, obviously, for Oklahoma here today in that 26 class.
Legitimately one of the best pure throwers of the football in 2026. Yeah. And to get this caliber of talent, top 100 overall prospect in the 26 cycle within the early 24/7 Sports player rankings, top 6 quarterback nationally too. And at a time where quarterback dominoes were falling and falling fast, Josh, Oklahoma had to go get its guy, and then Jaden O'Neal, the Sooners get their man. This is a very exciting addition for Oklahoma. This is one they wanted really bad, and to get it done and get it done quick, huge for OU.
Just look how quickly they moved on it, too, because, when he was at camp, at Brent Venables' camp a couple of weeks ago, we talked about it then, and, that Oklahoma made a really good impression, that he sold some other vids he wanted to go on, and then it's like it just kind of kept, the timeline just kind of kept shrinking, and now here you are. He announced his commitment on our national YouTube channel, and he's in town, and it's funny to think about once upon a time when Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma, is OU still going to be able to get those top-end quarterbacks? Well, Jackson Arnold, Michael Hawkins, Kevin Sperry, and now Jaden O'Neal, they're doing just fine. The ramifications for Oklahoma on a broad sense, we'll talk about kind of where the 26 class can go from here in just a second. But for Oklahoma as a whole, kind of tying into really what I just said, and for Seth Latrell to bring this kid in, right? His first really big fish, just kind of putting into context the ramifications for Oklahoma, kind of just moving forward and what this means for the program. As Jackson Arnold's the guy right now, but Jaden O'Neal might be the next guy to lead you even further into the SEC, here down the road.
Yeah, look, I think specifically for Seth Latrell, this is huge. I mean, you're looking at him as a former player at the University of Oklahoma, specifically an offensive player now taking over what's likely a dream job, being the coordinator of the unit he once played in at Oklahoma. He takes over, and look, we got asked plenty at Sooners Illustrated by fans and subscribers, what was recruiting going to look like with Seth Latrell stepping in? Because you mentioned Lincoln Riley, what he was able to accomplish, not just on the recruiting trail and landing Caleb Williams, Spencer Rattler, but also the transfer portal, guys like Kyler Murray when he was the coordinator, and then obviously became the head coach, and then Jalen Hurts. On top of that, though, Josh, let's not forget Jeff Lebby was one heck of a recruiter. I mean, it was huge for OU to bring a guy like that in who was also an alumni of the program. When he took over as OU's OC, he made it very clear in helping to land Jackson Arnold and then, of course, Michael Hawkins and Kevin Sperry that Sooner quarterback recruiting was there to stay. He's now off to Mississippi State in Seth Latrell. I think to just get his first major domino falling in his direction is massive. And on top of that, Josh, I think what is really cool is Jaden O'Neal, to me, really fits what Seth Latrell wants to do offensively, right? This isn't necessarily a coordinator who's going to ask you to do a massive amount with your legs. He wants to stretch the field vertically. There's going to be a lot of threats down the field, and it's going to be kind of like a mix of a smash mouth downhill offense with some of those vertical elements built in. And Jaden O'Neal is known as one of the best pure deep ball throwers of 2026. Obviously, he's someone can be mobile in the pocket, but being that true dual threat, maybe not in him, but Seth Latrell doesn't need that considering some of the calls that he's going to be implementing as OU's offensive coordinator. So it's a pure fit from a scheme perspective. I think Jaden O'Neal and Seth Latrell really mesh from a personality perspective. And on top of that, too, you can tell that Jaden O'Neal is really invested in Oklahoma. And that's the last point I'll make. This guy's going to take over at a time where he would be potentially one of the first in that inevitable quarterback competition when Jackson Arnold takes his career elsewhere after his days at Oklahoma. And to get a highly ranked prospect to make sure that you're settled in following one of the most important signal callers getting ready to take over that OU quarterback job in Jackson Arnold. Huge for Jaden O'Neal to come into a place like Oklahoma with a coordinator like Seth Latrell and overall just be a very natural fit.
Assuming that Jackson Arnold goes 2 years and is off to the NFL, which is the plan, right? You never know how things are going to go transpire, but assuming that's how it goes, that is one heck of a battle with true freshman Jaden O'Neal. Assuming Michael Hawkins has been there for a couple of years at that point, Kevin Sperry, in between them, it's going to be fun to watch how that all kind of plays out and who actually ends up taking the reins after Jackson Arnold. Again, if all goes according to plan and he has a couple of great years and moves on, that's going to be fascinating to watch how that all kind of shakes out. So we've talked about it before. Quarterbacks, they often are kind of the centerpiece of their class. Jackson Arnold certainly was with his group, and you're kind of seeing a little bit of that same with Kevin Sperry, certainly, and Michael Hawkins. You already have a couple of 26 guys on the board with Jonathan Hatton, we've talked about a lot. They just picked up Grady Mix at tight end, last week, and now you have Jaden O'Neal. So this 26 class is off to a fast start offensively in particular. Just kind of where do you see it kind of blossoming from here when you have a guy like this out in California, a big name quarterback that most people know and know how good he is? What can this now do for the 26 class kind of moving forward as that cycle starts to pick up more and more steam over the next couple of years here?
Look, it's always wildly important, not just for a program, but for a quarterback recruit to identify where you're going early in order to build out the rest of this class. And in Oklahoma, where Jaden O'Neal lands, like you mentioned, to have some of the early offensive weapons built around him. I know that he told Blair Angulo and Greg Biggins for us at 24/7 Sports, part of the reason why he wanted to go to Oklahoma, because he knew that there were going to be offensive weapons around him. And then Jonathan Hatton Jr., a top 125 overall talent, nationally for us at 24/7 Sports, Ryder Mix, the very talented tight end who his father played at OU. They just added him during camp season. This is kind of a trio that you're very excited about potentially building out the rest of the cycle because, look, Ryder Mix, he plays at a place like Frisco Lone Star. He's kind of in that north DFW area, so there's some DFW ties. He has that Oklahoma alumni built into him with his father being a former athlete at Oklahoma. And then Jonathan Hatton Jr. is all the way down in Cibolo playing at Steele. And look, that's a ways away from Norman, Oklahoma. But Jonathan Hatton Jr. has also talked to us about how excited he is to kind of play that quote-unquote GM role. And then in Jaden O'Neal, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Having someone outside of this region to play a major role for you, be that primary influence, the impact this could have specifically in West Coast recruiting within the 2026 cycle is huge. But then on top of that, what he could do out West, I think Jaden O'Neal has made it very clear that he's coming to Oklahoma because he really wants to play in the SEC. And so I would not be surprised, especially considering the fact that Jaden O'Neal has that, like we kind of talked about on the podcast, that cool guy Cali vibe. He's very easygoing, natural to talk to. He has no problem getting into any conversation and thriving in it. This is the kind of quarterback you want to lead your cycle, right? He's not going to have a problem reaching out to guys, getting to know them, being honest with them, and overall just connecting with them as these guys go through the recruiting processes. If he can be the leader for OU in 2026 with some of these other presences along with him, it's quite the three-headed monster for Oklahoma to start out with in 2026 so far.
Not a bad start, to say the least, for Seth Latrell and Joe John Finley in that 2026 class as they're starting to piece that together. So there you have it. Oklahoma's got their 2026 quarterback, star stud prospect, Jaden O'Neal. Be sure to mosey on over to Oklahoma.247sports.com for more coverage analysis coming out of this huge get for Oklahoma in 2026 with Jaden O'Neal, and of course, more coverage to come. Become a VIP member, Sooners Illustrated. This guy right here is all over it, along with all of our national recruiting experts from the 24/7 Sports Network. Oklahoma lands Jaden O'Neal in 2026. For Collin Kenny, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll see you guys next time back here on Sooners Illustrated.